Hello friends, this is Ralph, and this video is especially for the new users and beginners to the 2600 synthesizer. Many of you are probably afraid that their new acquired unit is broken or malfunctioning. Relax. Usually there is nothing wrong with your synthesizer. In today's video, I'm giving you the 5 most common misunderstandings and issues you may run into. So stay tuned. On my various social media channels and here on YouTube, I have noticed that people are asking me always similar questions. They are worried that their newly acquired Behringer 2600 synthesizer might be malfunctioning or is probably broken. So I have compiled the most common misunderstandings about the Behringer 2600, the ARP 2600 or any other 2600 clone. Usually there is nothing wrong with your synthesizer. So let's dive into the 5 most common misunderstandings about the 2600. Alright, we are looking here at the Behringer 2600 Grey Mini. Before I go ahead, please be informed that I have connected an Arturia KeyStep keyboard controller to the Behringer 2600 via MIDI. Please check out my beginner tutorial for the Behringer 2600 synthesizer if you are not familiar as how the signal flows through the synthesizer. Check out this tutorial. I put the link into the description box of this video. So the first misunderstanding is that especially beginners unintentionally turn up here initial gain. And then they think that the resultant droning sound is a sign of a defect with the synthesizer. That is not the case. Let me tell you what I mean. So I have patched here a very simple sound. So when I press the key, when the key is depressed, there is a sound. And when I release the key, the sound is off and fades away. That's how beginners expect the synthesizer to behave. So when I turn up initial gain here, you hear there is a sound which keeps on droning. So initial gain increases the bass amplitude or volume of the voltage controlled amplifier. And this is something that beginners are actually not looking for. Anyway, for beginners, it's quite confusing when the sound here keeps on droning on. But for the moment, suffice it to say, one thing you can use initial gain for is to tune the oscillators. Then you have both hands at your disposal. So the next misunderstanding is quite similar to the first misunderstanding about initial gain, and that is running the VCF output directly into the final mixer. So I'm turning up the VCF signal here in the final mixer and you don't hear anything, and that is because the filter here is closed. The filter opens here via the envelope. I have increased this slider here, I turned it up. Now when I press a key, the envelope is opening up the filter. Okay, when I increase the bass frequency here on the VCF, you hear that there is a droning sound. And that is because the voltage controlled filter signal is running directly into the final mixer without any control via the voltage controlled amplifier. Now I'm giving you a quick example, a little patch, how turning up initial gain and running the VCF output directly into the final mixer can be useful in a musical way. So I turn up here initial gain, and then I also run the filter output into the final mixer. And you hear the sound keeps on droning. This is the note that I played last. So you hear that there's also this drone sound of the last note that I have played. This can be quite interesting depending on the musical arrangement. So you see, this is a simple usage for this feature, initial gain and running the VCF signal directly into the final mixer. And you can also bring in the reverb. So the next misunderstanding about the 2600 synthesizer is that users, especially beginners, think there is something wrong with the pulse width slider here on oscillator number 3. To explain what I mean, let's start here with oscillator number 2. I brought it up here in the filter mixer. The audio input, you see the pre-wire connection is VCO number 2, the square wave. I press a key on the keyboard. I change the pulse width, and you can clearly hear that the width of the pulse is changing. Okay, and now I bring up VCO number 3, press a key on the keyboard. I change the pulse width slider and nothing is happening. And that's due to the fact that the pre-wired connection for oscillator number 3 is a sawtooth waveform. And of course, the pulse width slider is not affecting a sawtooth waveform. For that, we have to take the pulse output and plug it here into the VCO number 3 slot, and then we override the pre-wire connection, and now we have a pulse wave running into the filter mixer. And now as I change the pulse width slider, you can hear how I'm changing the width of the pulse. This sometimes seems so obvious, but every now and then I'm still receiving messages, people asking me what is wrong with my 2600 synthesizer. Alright, so now let's start with misunderstanding number 4. Sometimes, especially beginners, think that there is something wrong with the ADSR connection here in the voltage controlled amplifier. Let me tell you what I mean. So we start here, we bring up the AR envelope here in the VCA. And as I change the position of the slider here, you hear how the AR envelope is controlling the voltage controlled amplifier. So when I'm trying to do the same thing here with the ADSR envelope, then you can see and hear that the ADSR envelope starts acting and affecting the VCA just in the last upper third here of the slider. Here in the lower third of the slider position, nothing is happening. So there is nothing wrong with the VCA and the envelope. This is due to the fact that here the input is exponential. That means the behavior of the envelope that is running into the VCA via the exponential slot has an exponential curve and exponential behavior. In order to have a linear behavior, I take here the ADSR output and run it into the linear slot. The prewired connection of the linear slot is the AR, but now I'm running the ADSR into the linear slot. And now here, okay, so everything is fine with the VCA and the behavior of the ADSR and AR envelope. And the final misunderstanding about the 2600 synthesizer is the fact that sometimes people are not aware that the reverb output of the right channel and the left channel are phase inverted. When you run it through a stereo output, everything is fine. But when you run it through a mono connection, then you run into some issues. Let me give you an example. Here now I have made a mono connection. When I increase the reverb right channel, you can definitely hear the reverb. So when I bring up now the left channel, there is barely any reverb. Now the left channel is open. When I bring in the right channel reverb, the reverb is going away. That is due to the fact that the reverb outputs of the right and the left channel are phase inverted, and when you bring up both channels when going through a mono connection, the reverb channels cancel each other out. And now I'm giving you the same reverb sample through a stereo connection. It's only the right channel, right reverb channel, and also now here the left reverb channel. Alright friends, this is my list of the most common misunderstandings about the 2600 synthesizer. If you guys can think of something else, please write a comment below. This might be very helpful to other users who are starting out with a 2600 synthesizer. Also make sure you check out my other tutorials about the Behringer 2600, ARP 2600, which also applies to other 2600 clones. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it may help new users who are starting out with the Behringer 2600. And now, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope I see you again in my next video. And until then, take care, stay safe, peace.